Shalom and welcome to another edition of our Daily Bread, where we talk about the Torah portions. Today is actually a special message for the holy days. We're on Feast of Unleavened Bread 2012-13, and so I'd like to do a message for the holy days as well. And so my message for this holy day, which you can find the commandments in Leviticus 23 for the holy days, the feasts of YHWH, there in Leviticus 23, and basically we have Passover, and then after Passover is the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and it is symbolic of Israel coming out of Mitzrayim, or Egypt, and having the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Because they came out of there in haste. God brought them out quickly. So anyway, my message for 2012-13 is called The Accumulation of Sin. And in this year's Feast of Unleavened Bread, I want to focus on this concept of leaven and sin and how it relates to sin, and really what this means, what this time means for us. We keep going through these holy days, and hopefully every year you hope that God teaches you more deeply about their meanings and their significance. And so we're going to talk about sin and how it accumulates. We start this off with the concept of leaven. As you know, when people are preparing for Passover and preparing for the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the 7 days of unleavened bread, we're going through our homes, we're looking for leaven, we're researching leaven. Leaven is really a lot like, it reminds me of eating kosher. Eating kosher, there's the surface level, which is like, oh, well, we should eat chicken instead of ham. Like, that's the basic level when you read the instructions that say, okay, it needs to chew the cud and have a cloven hoof, so don't eat this and do eat that. And then what you find out is that's a start, but then, people go to, Burger King and say, instead of the bacon burger with bacon, can I get the bacon burger without bacon? Or I'll order the chicken sandwich. Now, as you get further in, you start to learn about the kosher symbols and the certifications and why you might want to, look into certifications instead of just doing what you think, because here you think that you're ordering the chicken sandwich, but you don't understand that the guy actually made your bacon burger, put the bacon on there, and then just peeled it off. And there's still bacon crumbs all over your bacon burger, but you don't know because you're not that aware. You just figured when you ordered the bacon burger with no bacon, it's good. Or, you get to higher levels as you grow, and as you seek to be righteous, you'll find flaws in your own understanding. You'll go to Subway and say, well, I just ordered the turkey sandwich, but then you'll realize that the same glove that was just holding that slimy ham sandwich, making that, the same one. So then you elevate to a new level and you say, well, wait a minute, can you change your gloves, right? This is the normal progression of people learn. Then what you realize is, even though they changed the gloves, that doesn't account for earlier in the day what you didn't see, which is the guy who reached over your turkey pan with the dripping ham. It just dripped on that piece of turkey. And so you come in, they change the gloves, and they take that ham defiled piece of turkey and lay it on your sandwich, right? I've had that before where, you go in, you ask them to clean the grill and to do all this and that, and then I ate something and it oddly tasted like shrimp. Why? Because you can't control the level of cleanliness, and if something else is there, whether it's the spatula or it's the grill, and you thought you cleaned it, but there's still something getting in there, there's splat from other things, there's 100 ways why your food can be defiled, okay? Or you can get into the containers. Oh, that container did have ham in it. Oh, they were supposed to wash it, but they didn't. So guess what's at the bottom? A bunch of ham juice absorbed into your turkey. Or the manufacturing company that sliced ham and didn't really wash the blade and then sliced the turkey. Oh, then there's a problem. So then you start to understand that certifications may matter, because that means somebody's there looking, knowing that equipment is not coming in contact with other equipment. If it is, what's the cleansing process, right? So now certifications make sense, because you simply don't know, even though you call the minimum wage employee who tells you, yeah, there's no pork products in there. Like, most people aren't even calling manufacturers to find out about processes or ingredients, then you realize, oh, well, something doesn't say it's got any ham, so it must be good. Oh, well, then you learn that there's processing, or the equipment is shared, or this and that. That's another level of awareness. And as you go further and further in, then you find the sneaky ingredients you didn't know were pork, or even checking the certifications. Oh, well, they might think with this certification that's okay if it came in contact with this, because it's now no longer, it's a byproduct. There's all these things that you learn over time as we grow, just like babies grow up and they learn there's more to the world than what they once thought. Well, this is kind of how sin is. You know, sometimes we think it's, well, I learned that once, so now I'm good. Well, I looked at the Sabbath, or I looked at the timing of Passover one time. Now I know. Well, 3 years later, you've learned other things. Now when you go back, you understand the text differently, you understand the Hebrew words differently. You may find that you don't believe the same way anymore. You've got to constantly recheck. And it's the same thing when we're cleaning out. This is the model of cleaning out our house from leaven. Because it isn't just about doing what you did last year. It's about reevaluating what you did last year, and if you really understood all of that well enough, or should you take it to a higher level. You see, we want to sit down and say our work's done. We don't want to reevaluate. We don't want to relook at. We don't want to look at the mistakes in our understanding that could change everything and put us back at square one of having to relearn everything. But this is what this time of unleavened bread is. This time prior to the unleavened bread, where we're searching out our homes. It's an introspection. We're searching out ourselves. Is our judgment right? Do we need to alter that? What have we learned? Have we advanced? Or are we just doing what we did last year? Are we growing? Becoming more righteous? Or are we staying the same? Or has time allowed us to keep holding on to ignorance that we've already had from last year, and we're going to carry that over as a tradition into this year? You know, one of the things, memories that I have, it was funny about Pesach. I remember when I sat down to write my first Haggadah of what we were going to do. And I was meeting at a fellowship at the time, a congregation that I'm no longer meeting at. And I remember that I looked over all of these things. My project was to put together the Haggadah, and I was supposed to look over all these Messianic Haggadahs. It was a new congregation, and so we were going to go over the traditional ones, all the various Messianic ones, plus read through the scriptures, and that was supposed to come out to our Haggadah, the best of all worlds, is what I was thinking. And I ended up getting in arguments with the other person I was working with at that fellowship over what we were going to do, because I went and I created this Haggadah that I thought was represented the best of all those worlds, and he didn't like it. He wanted something more traditional. You see, this is where we looked at things a little differently, because I took some things out. Some things didn't make sense. The Dehenu didn't make sense. I'm like, how can you say that this would have been good enough? This is all part of the plan of God. How can you say it would have been enough if you just brought us out of Mitzrayim and didn't give us the law? I remember that was one that just didn't sit right. I wasn't going to say that, because that's not true. It wouldn't have been enough to come out of Mitzrayim and not get the law. Like, that's part of why you were brought out of Mitzrayim. As a matter of fact, the spiritual significance of that is horrible, because that's kind of like where the Christians were. They looked and they said, well, sin isn't good and I'm supposed to obey Jesus. But somehow they got that sin was bad, but they didn't get far enough into that then they should start keeping the law. Like, that's the Dehenu. They were brought out of Mitzrayim and didn't receive the law. That isn't good enough. As a matter of fact, God knows that it isn't about hurrying up and getting done, right? It's growth. It's that it wasn't good enough. It's like saying it was good enough that I scratched at the ground and prepared a hole but didn't plant the seed. It would have been good enough that I planted the seed but never gave it any water. That's just a lie. It doesn't make logical sense. It wouldn't be good enough. Right? The goal is to bear fruit. You've got to water, you've got to dig the hole, you've got to do all this. God's whole plan is what is good enough. It isn't good enough to do part of it, as the scriptures say, being partial in the law. So I just didn't see how that made sense. And when I brought that up, the person that I was talking to was more interested in just doing the traditional things than making sure that those traditions were done right. Let's just take what other people did, what the Jews did, and bring it current. So now we're doing what they did. Let's just do what we did last year. Even though maybe we didn't look that last year wasn't good enough. See, in my opinion, we should be growing and becoming more righteous. We should be doing what makes sense. We have to go back and check what the Jews did for 1,000 years and make sure, does that make sense? Wait a minute, this doesn't seem to make sense. Well, if it doesn't make sense, I'm not going to keep doing it. I'm not going to carry forward the sins of others or our forefathers or of the Jews into modern day. I'm going to check it against the Torah. Humbly. Because maybe I don't understand the Torah enough to know why they chose that. But sometimes, yeah, you actually do, and you can see it's a clear violation. Then you reject it. And you say, you know what, I'm not going to carry that tradition forward. That doesn't make sense. How about the 4 questions of Passover? Well, it looks like some of them don't make sense, and they're not really pointing to the meaning of Passover. They're kind of literal, Peshat level stuff. And then, actually, 2 of the questions, they repeat themselves. The third question is really a repeat. Okay? In the scope of it. So I changed the 4 questions. And I made them more about Mashiach with the answers. Why is this, that? Oh, because this is meaning. Not just, making it a literal interpretation. And again, he didn't want to change those original things. And so when we look at this, it brings up an important thing as we look about why that story reminds me, and I'm still good friends with that guy, and it doesn't mean I'm right or he's wrong. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that we need to look at this and realize that every year we should grow in righteousness. It's like searching your house for leaven. It's like finding new spots where we didn't look before, right? It's not just looking in the same 3 spots we always look. It's, did you pull out the vents? Did you vacuum in there? We didn't do that. So if you do that, it should be an accumulation of becoming more righteousness, not an accumulation of sin. And the difference between those two is that you can accumulate sin by just doing what you've always done. Why? Because it's not just about doing what you've always done. When you calculate in the fact that if you were doing some of those things wrong, sin has a way of adding new sins. Somehow we don't just naturally go to order. We naturally go to chaos. So the problem with that is that you have last year's sins and from your ignorance, right, that are carrying forward the things you're still doing and still believing that you didn't resolve and you didn't grow wiser in. If we don't look at ourselves, then we just carry forward all the sins from last year and the misunderstandings and misinterpretation, plus we add new ones. New things that we looked at and got wrong. And then we're going to add those to the things that we got wrong from before. And you're just accumulating sin. It's like leaven. All year long, you're eating a cracker, crumbs fall down. All year long, you're bringing leaven into your house. You're making messes into your house. If you don't do the deep cleaning throughout the year, you're accumulating those messes. They're going to show up on Passover. They're going to show up as you're getting ready. Now, every year we're adding to the crumbs. The crumbs we didn't find because we never picked up our vent and didn't see that the crumbs were there from last year? There's crumbs from 3 years ago in your house. Because you didn't dig deep enough to clean those. So those all carry over, plus the new crumbs you've added in other places around your house. So then you get to prior to Passover and you're starting to clean. And now are you going to do a good job? An okay job? Or a poor job? Are you going to clean better this year than you did last year? Because if all you do is the same level of cleanliness, you're actually accumulating more leaven in your house. That's the danger. That's just like sin. It's so easy to accumulate sin. It's so easy to add things. We have all the sins that we're ignorant of. We don't study and undo those to change the sins we're already doing. Plus, we have the opportunity to add new sins every year. So, to the person who still goes out there and says eats food that's not really kosher, but they think it's kosher, right? They love to go to Subway. Well, last year they went to Subway, and this year they went to Subway, and they're still eating unclean food. Okay? They're not being careful enough, but they don't know it. So their ignorant sins are carrying forward. And oh, by the way, now they're eating at this new favorite sandwich shop they got down the street that they found this year, and they just love it. They opened up, and they always order the chicken sandwich. But they serve pork at that restaurant too. So most likely, they're not eating clean food. They're actually expanding their sin. And so what we need to do, just like good user interface, right? A good user interface gets simpler and easier. There's less clicks to get to do the same thing. That's how you refine it. In the same way, our righteousness has to be refined, right? In order to refine it, we have to remove the flaws. Every year you should be removing more flaws from last year, plus getting rid of and reevaluating the new things you've decided that are okay, and the new theories. But that's not how it goes. We are backsliding Israel. We slide back into old sins. We have the sins that we were ignorant to, that we don't even believe are sins, that we're still doing. And hey, we added some new ones this year. We added whole new sins. Right? We ate crackers in new spots of our home to spread that leaven around our household. And this is the problem. There's an accumulation of sin. We think when we get rid of the big sin that we got rid of it. Actually, getting rid of the big leaven, when there's a big loaf of leavened bread in your bread box, that's the easy one to get rid of. We go take it. We eat it before Feast of Unleavened Bread, or we get rid of it. We throw it out. We do whatever. Right? The hardest stuff is the small stuff. Anybody who's got a toaster, yeah, you try and clean that for Passover. Something tells me at the end of the day that there's some leaven microbes in there anyway. Like, if you ever try to clean that out, you can blow it out with air, you can wash it, you can do all this. Something tells me somewhere there's a crumb that you can't see, that you didn't get. You know? It's frustrating. You know? Many years we would just give the toaster away. We'd donate it every year. Like, I didn't want the mental strain on my mind, knowing that I'm not going to be able to clean it good enough. That I'm still going to have trouble. So I'm going to spend all this time, do all this. So I just said, forget about it. Every year, we'll buy a new toaster. Because they're just not designed well. There's all these little spots the crumbs can get into the electronics. And it's like, really? Am I going to spend a day cleaning my toaster? Or is it easier to donate it and buy a new one every year? You know? Or go without during that time. Whatever. You know what I mean? And these are all calls. These are ways that we calculate our judgment. These are things that we have to consider, at least. Some people don't do enough. Some people do go overboard and do too much. Doing too much is probably better than not doing enough. But all of us, you know, that doesn't mean just be crazy either, because part of judgment is learning how to do enough and do difficult things. Maybe I'm supposed to clean that. Maybe there's a lesson in me cleaning out that toaster and making sure I do a better job every year, so that I'm a superb cleaner of toasters. I don't know. You know, but the point is these are all ways that we learn. There's gray areas then when you get in leaven, right? Because there's all kinds. Some people only do, I'm going to do the leaven that's just says yeast. And then they say, well, this is brewer's yeast, but this is actually not the same. It's an inactive yeast, so that's okay. And they allow that to stay, and they're going to just do the other one. Or they say, leaven and clean Passover, it's such a great thing because it's really about judgment. Some people cut themselves slack and they do such a easy, lazy job that they say, oh, well, that was only really talking about bread, leavened bread. It wasn't really talking about my baking soda because I'm not eating it. So I'll just leave that in my house. Or, I'm not going to throw out my toothpaste because, it's not food that I'm eating. Or they say my dishwashing detergent isn't a problem, even though it's got it in there. Or my dog food. Or they justify it and say, but it's hard, or I don't have an alternative. God wouldn't want me to throw out my toothpaste. Now I just found out about that, and, God blessed me with that toothpaste, and that'd be wasteful. God doesn't want me to be wasteful, so I'm just going to keep it. Well, they're just justifying themselves. Or you could say, you know what, if I know that it's in my toothpaste, maybe I should plan next year a month in advance. If it isn't about whether or not it costs me money, do I suffer loss? Maybe you suffer loss. because of your ignorance. That's part of your lesson. You throw a huge bag full of food away, then you didn't plan very good, because you should have been planning a month in advance to start eating up your leaven that you had in your house and not buying new leaven, so that you wouldn't have a whole bunch of stuff that's half used, and then you say, but I don't want to throw it away. So they end up actually sinning and keeping it, because they don't want to suffer any loss. I used to throw my toaster away. One year I just threw it away. People thought, that's wasteful. How dare you? Well, they were just justifying their own position because they were too lazy probably to deal with their toaster issue. And since that made them feel guilty, that they weren't as zealous about keeping the commandment, then they became critical of me. Oh, you're being wasteful of God's things. Or that's foolish. And it's like, well, what's the cost? It doesn't mean I don't care about my toaster. That could have been an expensive toaster. But I care more about obeying God. And if I have to suffer loss, even though I can't even afford to buy a new toaster, because I waited till the last minute and then realized, oh, what about the toaster? Then I suffer loss. Don't be afraid to suffer loss. People died to obey God's laws. Okay? That's greater than throwing a toaster away. Abraham was willing to sacrifice his own son, his only heir. Okay? Mashiach gave all. So don't tell me about the cost, that it cost you something. God doesn't want you to do anything that costs you something, because I disagree. The whole concept of the offering system and all that is that sometimes, you suffer, and you suffer greatly, and you'll be tested to suffer greatly in order to obey God. And it's counted to you as righteousness. So if you think that God doesn't want you to have to give up anything, first of all, it could be your poor planning. And even no matter what it is, doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. These are all areas where we study and we grow in judgment. These are gray areas. So then I get a study on the two words used, which are matzah, right, for unleavened bread. And then there's se'or, which is talking about sourness or fermentation, right? There's a couple of, or hametz, right? This yeast. And when you start to dig into what those words mean, you may come to the point and say, I'm not going to do things that are sour, like sour cream. I don't do it. Because then you get into, what does this mean? What does this leaven mean? Is it just about that it's puffing something up? Is it something that is fermented, that is soured, that has gone bad? Is it that now this is a rejoicing that we have a new chance, that we've taken away that sin that has soured something, that has defiled something that was pure? There's lots of different ways a person could look at it. I'm not going to prescribe one way or another, but I am going to say that people, you can't look at judgment and say, but what will that cost me? Oh, you mean I wouldn't have cheese? Well, that's lame, because I love making homemade matzah pizza. So there's people who will simply, their line of thinking is that, well, I really enjoyed making my own leavened bread, and now I make a little pizza out of it, and that's fun. I don't want to give that up. So I'm not going to define it as including cheese. I don't know. If that's why, right, there's gray areas where we don't know exactly what it's going to be expected of us, what the intent was. But if the reason you're not doing it is because you have a bribe, you have something that you don't want to do, I don't want to not have cheese, I enjoy cheese. That's not a very good justification. It'd be better if you thought, well, it doesn't apply to that, then, well, I don't believe that because secretly I don't want to give up that. That's unjust judgment. Okay, so we got to think about this stuff, right? There is a depth of knowledge and a depth of study. And when people ask me my opinion, I get people from all over the world. They ask me my opinion on things, on the Torah. I don't know everything. But I know there's some people who respect my opinion because I've thought about those things, because I've searched out those words, because I've gone and looked at those things and I've wrestled with them myself. And it's not about whether or not always they agree with my answer or not, but they want my thinking behind it because I spent that time, I invested that time into looking into that issue. And not everybody's ready for every issue. The Torah is deep as the deepest well there is. You're never going to exhaust it all. It's the 5 loaves you can't eat all of. See, the reality is most people are fairly lazy, including myself. How much more could I know? How much more could I have studied? Lots. But maybe compared to a lot of people, I have done more study than them. The fact is we can all do more no matter what we do. It's not going to be good enough, and that's okay. See, the Shema, loving Yahweh with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength, is really about effort, putting your best effort. It isn't about achievement. It's not about where you got. But your effort will be measured. How hard did you try? And that effort will produce fruit. Being lazy is a habit, and it'll produce no fruit, and it makes it easier to produce no fruit over time. Just like dry soil, it just dries up, and it's harder for it to be made fresh again because it's been dry for so long. Right? And the opposite, good soil and good seed come back stronger each year and produce even better seed. Right? That's how it works. See, the key is we have to subtract as much as we add when it comes to sin. It isn't just about learning new things. It's about unlearning and relearning the things we got wrong, plus learning new things. The fact is clean, right, to remove all leaven. There's only one level of clean. It's either clean or it's not. Clean is full removal. There is no more. Okay? We have to be real and realize that most of us, there is leaven found in our house during those 7 days. You know? We clean to the level that we find acceptable, but every year we should push that bar a little bit higher. Do a little better job. Because real clean, true clean, is only 0. Okay? We're not there. There's a crumb in your home. I know there is. Someone else could come in and find those crumbs. Someone else could come in and find that leaven that's in your home that you didn't check. Things you didn't even realize were leaven. Okay? And we can help each other. We can fellowship and we grow and we learn. But when it deals with sin, see, we have to have a subtract sin mindset. Just like getting the leaven out. We look through our lives, we look at our beliefs and say, which one of these is a lie and I don't know it? Where's that hidden leaven? Where's that hidden sin, that bad theology I believe that's just not true? The more you study, if you're not proud and you're not trying to find new things, but you're trying to also learn with an open heart, knowing that you might have to then undo things you've said or thought or believed before, if you go with the right heart, studying will help you subtract sin and ignorance from yourself. If you don't go in trying to find what you already believe, or go in to find exotic doctrine that you can use to tell everybody else and become important. It's a great mirror to find your flaws. Study it. Look at the Word of God every time new, saying, I don't know. Let me see this with fresh eyes. Let me not take all my biases into it. Let me just see what's there. Not what I want to see, not what I already think is there. But let's look at that text and see what it's saying. Every time you come to the text, you should have that. Don't come in thinking you know. Don't come in with all that. There's a value of putting the filter of what you understand upon it to extract more. But there's also a value in trying to see nothing except for what's said there. To have that constantly challenge you. To let the Word of God teach you things you didn't know. Okay? Teach you how you're wrong. These are the right questions to ask. It's just like refinement. You turn up the heat and you get more impurities. See, at one level of heat, you thought you got all of the impurities up and scraped them out and burned them out. And that's how a lot of people are with their faith. And they don't realize, but there's another heat, another notch you can turn it up. And what? There'll be new impurities that you didn't know were there because you just at the one level of heat. That's what we should be doing with the holy days and with our spiritual walk. Finding ways to turn up the heat to find our own flaws. Instead of rejoicing that we turned up the heat and removed all of our flaws. No, you didn't. Someone else who's found new ways to turn the heat up will come in. And the ultimate heat is God. He can turn it up to the ultimate level and find sins you didn't even know were sins. And find wickedness in you that you did know about. Subconsciously you wanted it to be right, and it wasn't. It's kind of like mopping the floor. See, finding sin, you're mopping to get the dirt off, and then somebody, or even yourself, is walking on that floor creating new footprints. Get off my floor, I'm cleaning. And yet it's your own footprints that are constantly re-dirtying the areas you already cleaned. And that's what we have to do. We have to chase our own footprints with our mop. And other people. Stay off my floor, and oh yeah, I'm messing myself up here too. Very hard to get that floor clean. Because even a mop sometimes just moves the dirt around. Doesn't actually remove it. When we take that dirt up in the mop head and we rinse it out, we remove it from there. And then we're stepping and adding more dirt while we're walking around trying to clean up. I mean, it's a very frustrating process, much like getting the leaven. When you understand how much you're defiling your own efforts, then you can at least try and make up for that. See, it's really about the final level of cleanliness. It's time and effort over time. It's the fact that running the mop around it doesn't make it clean. The mop may be dirty and polluting it. Your feet might be re-dirtying it. Other people might be influencing you and re-dirtying your floor. Okay? Cleaning is really hard. Some people come in, swirl a mop over it and say, yeah, I did it. It's clean. But an expert mopper is going, no, you just made these footprints over here. I just made footprints on your floor too. By the way, that mop head is filthy. You need to rinse that out. Did you see this spot you missed? Right? Anybody who's ever taught kids how to clean knows there's a big difference in your idea of clean, my idea of clean. When I managed restaurants, it was the same way. If I was training a new employee, I didn't just say, go clean the walk-in cooler. I'd go and have to show them, I want you to clean the walk-in cooler. Here's what I define as clean. And I'd show them, see, this should be gone, this should be wiped down. Even after I carefully did that, their idea of clean and what I would have done, two different things. That takes time and training. And that's what we're doing each year with these holy days. Each year we're coming back. It's a measuring stick. What have you learned? Have you learned to become a better cleaner? Are you carrying forward the traditions? Are you just the same as you were last time? Are you just coming back saying, let's do the Seder? And it's just the same Seder you did? You're dusting off the old decorations? Right? Or do you look at it fresh every year? Do you say, what are we going to do? Let's make this a great experience. That's what we should be doing. See, the fact is, what we learned from the holy days, what we learned from Feasting of Unleavened Bread, is that there's a deadline. Right? The 15th, right? It's the Feast of Unleavened Bread. You had all that time all year. You had all that time, the months, the weeks before, and every year it seems it's the same. We're running around frantically, we're doing something, we forget something. I was sitting there, thought, okay, you're doing all these things, getting all these details, and then you walk in and you go, oh, here's a cracker in my coat pocket, in an old coat pocket, or, hey, I forgot that these were leaven, or I didn't do that, or you didn't empty you vacuumed up some crumbs and you didn't empty and clean out the vacuum. Like, it could be all these different types of things. And remember, even though you're thinking perfection, you're not perfection. Don't fool yourself into thinking that. But effort does matter. And more preparation next year matters. Every year we say, oh, I've got to do a better job next year. And that's what you should be saying. See, it's just like having the loins girded, right? We're to eat the Pesach with our staff in our hand, our shoes on our feet, our loins girded. There's a deadline. There's going to come a time, and you need to be ready for it. That's what's great about the holy days, is they remind us that there's a deadline. They remind us that there's cumulative work that needs to get done. There's leaven all over the home, and it takes time to get out. And no matter what, you're never going to get it all out. There's leaven you don't even know that you're not getting out. And you're going to rack your brain, you're going to be frustrated, and you're going to do all this. And there's a time frame that needs to be done by. And if you didn't put a good enough effort up here, you're going to feel it when on the 16th you find another piece of leaven that you have to shamefully remove from your home because you forgot it. And you're going, ah. But again, we can alter that because we could do that earlier. We could be prepared earlier next year so that we give ourselves a few days where we thought all the leaven was out, and then we find that extra leaven, and it's still a day before it actually has to be out. See? Good planning goes a long way. You can't just rest on your excuses. This is really about judgment. And it teaches us the overlying lesson of removing sin from our lives. No matter how much sin you get out, there's still more there. Keep looking. Don't give you the stamp of yourself the stamp of approval. And there's a deadline. There's a deadline. And the more we plan ahead and the more sin we remove, and the more we're prepared before Mashiach comes, before we die and we go into judgment, work on it. Work on it and work on it early. Those who seek me early shall find me. Right? You don't want to be found in your uncleanness. You don't want to be visited when you're unclean. You don't want Mashiach to show up when you're supposed to have no leaven. And He can't sit at the table with you because your house is full of leaven. And God's commanded us to remove the leaven from our house to observe the Feast of Unleavened Bread. You see? So, it's really about understanding. When you think about your house, we deceive ourselves in the same way we deceive ourselves about ourselves. We think we're clean. We think we're not sinning. We have no idea the sin all over our bodies, all within our members, all over our house. Assume there's sin there that you're not seeing. And then you'll thank the person when you fellowship and they point out something. Your mind will be open to hear arguments against your theories. Because your whole goal is to get rid of those sins. To get rid of that leaven. Not to hold on to it. Not to add to it and accumulate it. It's so easy to slide backwards. I see it in myself. I see it in others. I see him doing things that I knew we talked about once that people agreed that was bad. And then I see him going back to it like a dog to their vomit. It's like, how is it that if we've talked about it and you've agreed with me that that was wrong, now I come back and I see you later and I see you doing that thing that we both called foolish. It's the same for myself. How do I go back and lower my standards when I should be increasing them? Pesach is a great way to learn that we should grow every year in righteousness. That every year our house should be cleaner than the year before. And we should be cleaner than the year before. So that we can create a clean place for God to dwell. Till next year, I'll say Shalom. And hug somebody.